Alright, YouTube, time for another video. I'm in a parking lot here, kind of near my office, and I will say, now today's a Wednesday, and even at my office, which, the work from home policy must still be, like, really fully intact at my office. Like, no one ever really cared to enforce any sort of coming back into the office where I work, because on Wednesdays, it's the busiest day of the week at my office, which I'd imagine is the trend for most companies, but even at my place, it's like 20 to 30% of what it was pre-COVID. So it's crazy how even in the busiest days of the week, which I would imagine again is Wednesday, the work from home crowd is reigns supreme where I work at, and socially it definitely affects me a little bit because I don't have much of a social life outside of my job, which is really sad because it's my job. It's not supposed to really be. I've never enjoyed any job I've ever had. I know some people say you should love what you do, but I mean, if that's the case, there would be no people like. I mean, I don't know a lot of people who are janitors who love what they do. I mean, no, thankfully, thank God people want to do those jobs because they're underappreciated in a lot of ways, but nobody wants to do that shit. I mean, I don't blame them. I don't want to clean up people's fucking shit or whatever. But yeah, I'm eating at this parking lot kind of near my job, and it is kind of nice to see it way more filled. They even have like a barbecue catering from that barbecue restaurant coming in. That's crazy. But anyway, it's crazy because um I've worked at this place I work at is mostly boomers or maybe really older Gen Xers, I guess, because like the boomers are now almost retired, but the Gen Xers, there's still some boomers probably in the workforce, but Gen X is mostly mostly the tail end of the workforce now, because Gen X is what, 50 somethings on average, and most likely you could even say maybe I guess the oldest Gen Xers would be 60 even. But yeah, basically, I work with mostly Gen Xers that are, early 50s, real late 40s, early 50s, married for a handful of decades now, have maybe a kid that's middle school aged or something like that. Um, and of course, and there has been a recent uptick in hiring uh, fresh out of college Zoomer types, which I probably align with more than the older people I work with, but due to me being in my early 30s, getting, I basically could say even mid 30s at this point, but I like to cling to early 30s. Um, Basically, as a, middle millennial type, um, I'm 32-ish. Basically, the Zoomers that we hire are like 22, maybe like 23, 24, fresh out of college, and I can still kind of socialize with them and feel like I'm part of them and they're, part of their culture or whatever, subculture. But I don't fit in at the place that I work really much at all. There's just not many early 30s, real late 20s, early 30s, 32, 34, 29 types. And it kind of sucks because, it would be nice to have that demographic at my job a little bit because that's where I align. But one of the things that's really weird to me is how I'll be at, when we first opened back up, because the lockdowns were, mandatory, we were not like an essential business. But when the lockdowns of COVID kind of ended, we opened back up and I was, going back into the office 4 days a week just to get out of the apartment I live in. And what's funny is, um, an older boomer type who was maybe late 50s birth, so he actually is a boomer, or very, a younger one, but still a boomer. He would complain about, he was one of those types who would complain about millennial shopping trends. He's like on the business side, and, we all hear, there's all these articles written about millennials killed napkins, we killed paper plates, I mean, it's like insane how much power we don't have, but we apparently do have. But basically, he was complaining to a slightly older guy, maybe late 40s, early 50s, and I was sitting next to them at my cubicle, and he realized like he's shitting on the millennials when a quintessential near perfect aged millennial is sitting right next to him working, and he's like, "You're one of the good millennials. You still come into the office." Now the irony is he works from home all the time now, which is funny as fuck. It's like he works from home way more than I do, and it's like, yeah, us millennials, we're all evil. But anyway, he became what he complained about. But anyway, what really made me laugh because that day, that exact same day, I was working out at the gym right after I would go to the gym, usually right after working at work, and I was doing some squats, and then another guy walked up to me, and he knew that I played basketball because I played basketball sometimes at that gym, and he asked me if he wanted to if I wanted to play some like 5v5s at the basketball court part of the gym at the LA Fitness. And I was like, in the middle of my squats, but I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I haven't played basketball in a while. And afterwards, this guy who, he's probably, I was like, at this point, I was probably 30, and he was maybe like 21, 20. And, he was younger, and I'm white, and he was, black. And he said to me, he said he knew my name and everything. He goes, "You're the only white guy that talks to me." And I'm like, Jesus, that's sad. Like, I'm sure he's like being a little bit facetious about over the top about it, but he means like as like a friend, I guess. Maybe, I'm sure he has acquaintances that are white people. It's like there's a lot of us, just have to walk around. There's white people everywhere, but I think he meant more on like a more friendship, personal level. And but anyway, it's just funny, and then he like says like, and he said, "I also forget you're in your 30s," and I'm like, man, it's like this boomer guy I worked with said I was one of the good millennials, meaning I'm like an honorary boomer in his eyes, and this like 21-year-old, which was about back then, it was about maybe I was probably about 30, no, I was like 28, 29. He was like viewing me as like one of him, and he's like 8 years younger than me, which, you know, 8 years when you're, as I've gotten older, 8 years isn't as much when it's like 33 versus 25. Oh, that's still a little bit of a gap culturally, but 28, 29 versus 21 is a little bit of a difference for sure. But maybe looking back on it, it wasn't that big. But it's just funny how he views me as like an honorary Zoomer. And I was just like, man, what the hell am I? Where do I fit in? But anyway, the main thing I wanted to bring up today was just talking about when we live in, people, influencers are in a state of arrested development. Basically, I think that influencers are in a state of arrested development to the point where whenever they first get like kind of like their first big influx of people following them, they stay at that like kind of mental age. And of course this isn't every influencer, obviously, but it does seem to be a big trend that, if you started getting big on Twitch because of, whether it's, we'll say in the mid 2010s, based on, YouTube or Twitch, based on talking about, the hoopla of the 2016 election, and my God, was it a fucking crazy one. Like, it seems like people are like in that state of arrested development based on that age, including, you see this everywhere. The two biggest examples I can look at are two of the most prominent names, Hassan Piker and Ben Shapiro, two radically different political philosophies. Both of these people seem to be stuck in an arrested development of when they first got kind of big. With Hassan, it was maybe right after the 2016 election, he started streaming on Twitch, and it seems like he hasn't done any changing. It seems like he's still the same fucking person. You could maybe say, you could even go further back to when he was on TYT, the Young Turks. I think he's maybe grown a little bit since then because his Twitch life is way different than his Young Turks life. But but it seems like when he started on Twitch, he had a massive, immediate following. It seemed like everyone started following him. He grew out of control, and it seems like he's in a state of arrested development. He still thinks he's like 25, and it's like, isn't that guy in his early 30s? He's a little bit older than me, I think, or maybe he's like right around exactly my age. And then you look at like Ben Shapiro, who, he was a little bit older when he first got famous. Nobody gave a fuck about Ben Shapiro. Like I said in another video, nobody gave a fuck about Ben Shapiro until the, Gamergate, Anita Sarkeesian, Zoe Quinn, that type of shit. Feminist frequency. I mean, Ben Shapiro owes all of his money to incels and Anita Sarkeesian. I made a video about that. I think it's my favorite video I've ever made so far. Because everybody I know who watches the Daily Wire, when I've asked them like what started you causing to watch this guy, because like I don't really watch. I'll watch the occasional video of these people just to see how they think. But I'll say it. I've said it multiple times. I am more left leaning than right leaning, and so I don't really agree with a large chunk of what Ben Shapiro says. But it seems like to me he owes all of his following to, like, people would make these wrecked feminist compilations on YouTube, and he's like the same guy since. It's like he's not really changed. It's like the same, like, overly, very, very, like, fast talker, has his same talking points over and over and over again, doesn't really listen to what the other person's saying very frequently. I mean, sometimes trying to just beat up on, college, like, Steven Crowder did that too, but going to like college campuses and talking to a 21-year-old, 20-year-old who is still figuring things out, and he's like at that point he was probably in his early 30s, now he's like 40, 41, and it's like still kind of thinking and doing that same mindset. And at some point it's like, yeah, these college kids who are maybe too far left or over the top with their aggression about anything even remotely different than them politically, that can be annoying. But I do think that, like, I don't necessarily think that these younger, for example, these protesters of Israel-Palestine, I don't know if they're doing it the right way. These college kids, I do think some of it's a little bit narcissistic, but I do think that I generally side that, there should be a place for Palestinians to call a home. I'm not sure if, middle class white people complaining about it at college is really the best optics for it, but I side kind of with what they're at least arguing. I think the Palestinians deserve a place to call a home. They're not, I don't necessarily like Hamas either, though. I think yeah, I don't want to really get into that because, I mean, I think Netanyahu's kind of a douchebag, and I think Hamas are kind of shitty people, and so Hamas is probably more graphically violent. But then again, Netanyahu wants to kind of kill a lot of people too. So I don't really like either. I don't like the leadership in either one of these groups, and so that's really a large chunk of my belief on Israel-Palestine. I hate the leadership of both. But I think the Palestinian people are not exactly Hamas either. So Hamas is a subset of Palestinians. Anyway, but the point is that Ben Shapiro acts the same way. Hassan Piker has not changed. These people are terminally, like, they are in arrested development based on when they first got big on social media. And the only people, again, I do think I have seen some people who stay on social media and they have changed. Ironically enough, I know that iDubbbz guy was kind of hated at first, or now his content is very kind of gross. Or maybe over the top edgy and insulting. And he seems like he has changed a little bit. I don't know. I haven't kept up with him enough, so maybe I shouldn't say that. But, or like, for example, PewDiePie. Obviously, he has one of the most controversial bad moments in YouTube history with the incident playing PUBG. But now he's like kind of transitioned off of playing games and stuff. And he just like blogs his life in Japan. He's kind of moved on. So it's like maybe he's grown out of that phase. But a large chunk of people, it takes like a really big, event for them to actually get out of that state of arrested development. And I think most influencers, by the way, this isn't just YouTubers and TikTokers. This is, it's even people like a lot of rock stars. I mean, just the other day I was looking at this article about Anthony Kiedis of Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he's like dating some 19-year-old, and he's like 61. And it's like, Anthony Kiedis probably still thinks he's like 19. Because of, not just because, in his case, it might be because of drug abuse. That's his arrested development. But they say social media is a form of arrested development. I mean, it's a form of drug abuse. It's like it has a lot of symptoms. The people addicted to social media display a lot of symptoms, basically, to drug abuse. So yeah, I think that, and another thing that came to my mind was, if you look up the history of America Online, there's a term that kind of is associated with America Online called Eternal September. Back in, I think, 1993 of September, when America Online first like had this huge influx of usage and people using it and everything. And now, I would argue that phrase Eternal September is a similar, it's basically just, happening to the individual peoples on these platforms. Facebook, YouTube, Reddit, Twitter, Twitch, Netflix. Well, Netflix is not Instagram, TikTok. Whenever you first get big on these sites, you stay that brain, like your brain like doesn't grow up. It like solidifies. And I think that's really scary. I think people can listen. I'm not saying it's impossible. There are examples of people who have overcome it, hopefully for the better. Maybe they've become even worse though. But yes, I do believe there is an eternal September for social media usage and influencer culture, and it's the large chunk of some of the most prominent ones. They reach a state of arrested development. Just my thoughts, and I'm out.